this particular session, we will talk about the organizational resilience and adaptability. Here, we will talk about what is organizational resilience, the evolution of thinking of an organizational resilience, finding fit, managing tensions and the avoiding erosion, organizational adaptability, adapting to a change environment, and how these adding position departments, building relationships, and difference between the integrations, and what is the difference between the organic versus the mechanistic management process. And finally, we will talk about the planning, forecasting and responsiveness, which we have talked about in the previous session, and here we will conclude it. So, in addition to this, as usual, you will have the case study, research papers and the book recommendations. When we talk about the organizational resilience, resilience is the accepting your new reality, and even if it is the less good than the one you had before, so therefore you are having the positive approach, because whatever were there into the your earlier this particular situation, and now whatever the your real situation is there, and here you are finding out that it is less good, it is not that good, but still you are welcoming it and having this the positive response to it. You can fight it, you can do nothing, but the scream about what you are lost, or you can accept that and try to put together something that is good is there. So, therefore, in that case, however, there might be the response according to this Elizabeth Edwards, that is we may feel uncomfortable, but when we are putting all things together, we will find that it is good is there. So, it is an ability of an organization to anticipate, prepare for, respond and adapt to the incremental change and a sudden disruption in our order to survive and the prosper is there. Now, the thinking in organizational resilience has evolved over the time and has been split by the two core drivers: defensive, stopping bad things happen, and the progressive, making good things happen. So, therefore, in that case, as well as a division between the approaches that call for the consistency that and those that are the based on the flexibility is there. So, it is better that is we are taking the actions which are not good for the organization, and therefore, in that case we stop those these bad things happen, and that approach will be that is we are more defensive is there. But what is expected? The expectation is the progressive, and the making the good things happen is there, and therefore, in that case on one side you are stopping the bad things to happen, and on the other side you are making the good things to happen. So, as a result of which the overall impact and that will be the good one. So, this will be the totally based on that you have what flexibility do you have, because the approaches which will be you are making for these changes are to make the defensive or progressive approach that will require the new actions. And if you are flexible, you will be able to take the new actions. So, organizational resilience is identified by 4 ways of thinking: preventive, control, defensive consistently, or the mindful action, and defensive flexibility, and performance optimization, progressive consistency, and the adaptive innovation is there. And therefore, here you will find that is these particular ways of thinking, that is the preventive control, that is how you are going to defensive consistency is there. So, we identify the 5 distinct phases with 5 contrasting perspective is there. A defensive perspective that focused on loss avoidance and value preservation, though the first 2 phases are there. So, here with the period of time, organizational resilience maturity, monitoring and the complying is there, that is a preventive control is to be there. As we grow with the time, we find noticing and responding is there, mindful actions are required, and that is improving and the exploiting is there. Now, here when we are talking about imaging and the creating is there, adaptive innovation is required, and the balance and the managing tension is there, then the paradoxical thinking is required. So, from preventive control to the mindful action, performance optimization, adaptive innovation and the paradoxical thinking is there. So, evolution in this particular way with the organizations, they are making their the approach towards the resilience, so that the organization can be survive and the grow. So, preventive control when we talk about now we will discuss each step into the detail, and the organizational resilience is achieved by the means of the risk management. So, whatever the risk is there, you are going to manage that particular risk in that particular business and organizational survival. Physical barriers are there, then the redundancy is there, the spare the capacity, identify that what things have become the redundant, systems backups and the standardized procedures are there, and which protect the organization from threats and allow it to bounce back from the disruptions to restore a stable state, and that is the defensive plus consistent is there. When we talk about the mindful actions are there, so organizational resilience is produced by the people who notice and react to the threats and respond effectively to unfamiliar or challenging situations, that is defensive plus the flexible is there. Now, here when we are talking about this organizational resilience and mindful action is there, here we have to understand, we have to understand the situation, and then we have to also find out that is what are the threats are there. So, here on one side we have to stop those threats, we have to stop that negativity, and the other side we have to be flexible. So, that is why the mindful action that is the required. So, here you need not to be the very aggressive, rather than you are supposed to take a action with the defensive and the flexibility. Performance optimization is the form by the continually improving, refining and the extending existing competencies, and the enhancing ways of working and exploiting current technologies to serve the present customers and market. There is a progressive plus consistent is there. Here it is very necessary, that is the whenever the we are into the lower comfortable situation, less good situations, then in that case we should continuously improve. We should try to improve and the refining the our organizational performance and taking it extending to the existing competencies are there. So, whatever the competencies are required, we have to take our organizations towards that level is there. Once you are taking this organization, it will definitely enhancing the way of working and the exploiting current technologies are there. So, sir, present customers and the markets is there. So, it will be progressive and consistent is there. Always focus whenever you are into the such type of the, because of the uncertainties there, then you have to be, these activities are to be performed. So, you have to design your organization structure accordingly, so that it becomes flexible. So, what is to be required here, that is the your structure is so flexible, as the challenges are there, as the environment is changing, immediately you are getting the support. Then this is the adaptive innovation. So, organizational resilience is created through the creating, inventing and exploring unknown markets, and therefore, in that case this type of the innovations which you are going to adopt, they are developing the new technologies, and organizations can be the disruption in their environment, that is progressive plus flexible will be there. So, adaptive innovation, that can be also a strategy, and through creating, inventing and exploiting the unknown markets and the new technologies that you can adopt, you can explore and you can find out that is how it is working. This evolution of thinking in organizational resilience, that is thinking on organizational resilience has been split between the behaviors and that are defensive, stopping behaviors, that is the stopping bad things happen, and those that are progressive, making good things happen, between the behaviors that are consistent and those that are flexible. These 4 points from 4 viewpoints from an internal part of a framework, which are we have termed the organizational resilience. There is a TQ, tension quadrant is there. So, this particular tension quadrant, that is having the consistency and the flexibility is there. So, whenever we are talking about the goal, process and routines, so this is making these progressive, achieving the results are there. So, consistency with the performance optimization, improving and exploitation is there, or the progressive will be adaptive innovation is there, and they will say that this is the progressive is there. Now, when we are talking about the defensive, the mechanism, then in that case we are making the mindful action is there, that is the noticing and the responding, while in the case of the consistency we have preventive control and the monitoring and the complying is there. So, therefore, in that case here with the flexibility and the consistency, we can develop this type of this the progressive model, and here we, when we are talking about organizational resilience or the tension quadrant is there, we have to take a decision accordingly. So, either the goals, processes, routines are consistent, and then we have to go by the performance optimization, or when the flexibility is there. So, we have to go for the adaptive innovations, mindful actions, or the preventive control is there. So, we can decide accordingly, that is what is our requirement is there. The next is the evolution of thinking on organizational resilience is the paradoxical thinking. So, organizational resilience is achieved by the balancing preventive control, mindful action, performance optimization, and adaptive innovations, and managing the tensions inherent in these distinct perspectives are there. Here it becomes very important, that is the organization finding it managing tensions and avoiding the erosions, that becomes are the strategies for the making the organization more resilient. Senior leaders need to manage the tensions between these four approaches. If organizations are to be truly resilient, we suggest that the shape of the organizational resilience, that is a tension quadrant, next figure, will depend on the nature of organization. So, this particular figure which we have talked about, that is the performance optimization, adaptive innovation, preventive control, and mindful action is there. So, here when we are talking about this particular figure will depend on the nature of organization. So, its operations, what type of the operations the organization is having, what type of the nature of industry, particularly level of uncertainty and industry clock speed, rate of technological, regulatory, and the market change is there. We tend to find, for example, that organizations with the high potential for accidents such as energy production, transport, mining, and the construction are often weighted towards the preventive control and defensive consistent quadrant. It should be noted that a preoccupation with one particular dimension could create blind spots that can impair organizational resiliency there, because the rest of the issues, those will not be focused. So, when we are talking about these energy production and the mining and constructions, so therefore, these are the nature of industries which will be having this particular issue of these organizational resilience with the handle the issues with the defensive consistent is there. Now, the organizational resilience finding fit, managing tensions and avoiding erosions are there, and therefore, it can be the progressive and the defensive both. So, performance optimization is there and adaptive innovation is there. So, here performance optimization, improving and the exploiting is there, and here organizations, they are making the better their performance by improving and the exploiting is there. Adaptive innovations, that is the imaging and the creating also, and then therefore, in that case in the case of the consistency and flexibility, these organizations are towards the flexibility, and here we have to also understand that is these flexibility and progressive organizations resilience strategies that will making you more adaptive innovation is there. Now, when there is a achieving the results and routines are there, then definitely we have to go by the improving and exploiting is there. But when we are going for this the mindful action, which is the solution. So, ability to anticipate, prepare for and respond and adapt to incremental change and the sudden disruption, when the person is creating more and more integration, balance and fit for purpose are essential, then this will be going for the mindful action is there, because the defensive mechanism protecting results are there and the flexibility is there. So, on the basis of this the defensive and flexibility, the mindful action, that will be the right approach. When the consistency and the defensive, so therefore, defensive is protecting the results and consistency is goal, processes and returns are there. We have to take care of the preventive control is there. When we are having this preventive control, then in that case we will be able to find out that is the how in the era of uncertainty we can go for this type of this responsiveness. Organizational adaptability refers to the an organization, group of collaborative organizations can adjust its structure and the business of processes and successfully achieve its goals. So, in accordance with the peculiar characteristics of the dynamic environments process, that is the improvisation is there. So, here you will see that is the whenever we are talking about the adaptable organization, the first and foremost is the individual. Unless and until your employees they are not ready, then definitely the organization cannot be the adaptable organizations. So, the individuals, most of the individuals, right, and when they are flexible, they are adaptable, they will come with the cultures, then definitely these will become a very very important issue in the case of organizational adaptability in the uncertainty and the volatile situations. Second is, what is the ecosystem, the work culture, the practices, and how the decisions are taken, and therefore that happiness index or the working their potential, and that will be enhances. The third one is the organization structure, which we are talking about. So, therefore, organizational adaptability also depends on the organization structure. If you remember in my initial sessions on this particular organization designing of work organizations, I have talked about that is about the horizontal structure and less power distance is required. So, whenever you will having the less power distance, all are equal, and when all are equal, then the adaptability will be much higher. But when you put the verticals into your organization structures, then those organizations they find comparatively more difficulty in the case of this adopting this culture. The people, those who are working and especially on the top management, middle management and lower management, all three are not having that teamwork, then they cannot be the successful in adopting these new changes. And finally, it is upon the leader who is the person who is behind these all activities. If a leader is competent enough and convenient enough, then in that case organization will be having the much better adaptability to the changing environment. So, these all issues we are talking about into the uncertainty represents uncertainty, issues of uncertainty. So, organization structure and internal behaviors. So, organizations facing uncertainty often use structural mechanisms, and that encourages horizontal communication and collaborations I mentioned earlier also to help the less the power distance in your organization structure, lesser is the power distance, better is the performance of the organization. Maybe the organization flexibility, maybe the organization adaptability, maybe the organizational ranking, whatever is you are talking about, then this will be becoming the very very important. So, organizations facing uncertainty, then in that case they have to go for the contingency for organization structure and internal behaviors. So, sometimes the seniors they are reporting to juniors, that reverse mentoring is also there. Suppose it is issue of an technology, then in case of the technology and adaptability is concerned, adaptable organization to the changing environment. So, reverse mentoring is also possible, because the younger one are better in technology as compared to the senior ones. So, therefore, in that case an important contingency for an organization structure and internal behaviors, that becomes very very important. Organizations facing uncertainty often use structural mechanisms, and that encourages the horizontal communication and in the changing environment is there. An organization in a certain environment will manage and control differently from an organization in an uncertain environment. So, therefore, we cannot compare that is one organization with the another organization unless and until we are not sure that is both the organizations are into the era of uncertainty is there. So, uncertain environment with respect to the positions and departments, organizational differentiation and integration, these are making the control processes and the future planning and forecasting is there. So, therefore, here you will find that is it is becoming important, that is the organizations are having the internal of combining the functions, that is the integration and the control process are there. Organizations need to have the right fit between the internal structure and external environment is there, and therefore, in that case here always which organization will be successful in uncertainty, which is having the right fit, and when you are talking about the internal structure and the external environment, then this is becoming important. Adding positions and departments. As complexity and uncertainty in the external environment increases, so does the number of positions and departments within the organization, leading to increased internal complexity. This relationship is the part of being an open system, and each sector in the external environment requires an employee or department to deal with it. So, adding new positions and departments is a common way for organizations to adapt to growing environmental complexity and uncertainty are there, and this is making the adding of the departments. The building relationships are there. The traditional approach to coping with the environmental uncertainty was to establish the buffer departments, and the purpose of buffering roles is to absorb uncertainty from the environment. Highly uncertain environments require rapid transfer of information and knowledge to the organization, and that can adopt quickly is there. So, it is very necessary, that is you are making a relationship between the observed the uncertainty and the performance of the organizations. Highly uncertain environments require rapid transfer of information and knowledge, so the organization can adapt quickly is there. So, naturally you should know that is what is the external environmental factors are there. So, therefore, external environmental factors, because they are changing so fast, by the time it communicated to you and by the time you are able to implement that and so the organization should be able to adapt quickly is there, otherwise the time will lost and the performance will be down. So, opening up the organizations to the environment by the building closer relationships with the external parties makes it to the more fluid and adaptable. So, organizations have to keep in touch with what is going on in the environment, so that the managers can respond to market changes and the other development is there. If you are not aware about the external environmental factors, then you will be too late to make the changes in your organization. This differentiation and integrations. So, another response to the environmental uncertainty is the amount of differentiation and integration among the departments is there. Organization differentiation refers to the differences in cognitive and emotional orientations among managers in different functional departments, and the differences in formal structure among these departments are concerned. When the external environment is complex and rapidly changing, organizational departments become highly specialized to handle the uncertainty in that part of the external environment each department works with. So, organizations that perform well in uncertain environment have a high level of both differentiation and integration, while those performing well in less certain environments have lower levels of differentiation and integration is there. The organic versus the mechanistic management process for handling this uncertainty in rapid changing environment, the internal organization was much looser, free flowing and adaptive, and with a loose hierarchy and decentralized decision making. As environmental uncertainty increases, the organizations tend to become more organic, which means decentralizing authority and the responsibility to lower levels, encouraging employees to take care of the problems by working directly with one another, and encouraging teamwork, taking informal approach to adopting the task and the responsibility is concerned. Thus, the organization is more fluid and is able to adapt continually to changes in the external environment. However, we guiltless government which sell how low fat broiler chips and other high quality snack foods shifted to a flexible network structure to remain competitive, and when Frito-Lay entered the market. So, the flexible structure allowed in the guiltless gourmet to adopt quickly to changing the market conditions are there. So, finally, we come to the planning, forecasting and responsiveness. The whole point of these increasing the integral integration and shifting to a more organic design is to enhance the organization's ability to quickly respond to the sudden changes in an uncertain environment is there. So, unless and until our organization is not responsive and is not aware about the external environmental changes, it will be very difficult for the organization to be becoming the competitive. So, if an organization wants to be the competitive, it should be always have a concern for the internal environment and the external environment both. And when we talk about the organization structures, so organization structure becomes the internal part of the organization is there. So, it is a ability organization should very quick to adopt and making the changes as per the demand of the time of uncertainty. However, in certain environments, planning and environment forecasting actually become more important as a way to keep the organization geared for a coordinated speedy response is there. So, therefore, it is the becomes very important, that is organizations they are gearing up for and coordinating very speedy response whenever they find that there is a lot of changes are there into the environment is there. When environment is stable, the organization can concentrate on the current operational problems and day to day efficiency, and improve the efficiency is there when there is no external threats are there. With increasing environmental uncertainty, planning and corporation have found that is the environment these become more turbulent, managers increase their planning activities and therefore in that case suppose you are geographically located at the different places then you are required to be making these your planning activities very strong, and particularly in the case of terms of planning exercises that encourages the learning, continual adoption and the innovations are there. Now here we find that is these terms of planning that encourages the learning adoption and the innovations are there. So there are these top 5 tips for attaining the organizational adaptability. Develop and implement more effective knowledge management systems. So we have understood that is when the organization will be more adaptive, when they are having those senses and they understand what is the uncertainty and what the flexibility is required. So develop the real important thing about knowledge management system is making the best use of the people's knowledge is there. So we should have the knowledge creation, knowledge storage, knowledge distribution systems. We should develop the repositories so that our knowledge management system that can be stored and can be used for the further decision making the process which are similar to the problems which the organization have faced earlier. So people's knowledge is the experience, education and ideas that are not readily available as actual resources until somebody discusses them and makes them apparent. Knowledge management only has to act as efficient and open communication channels that go both ways, top and bottom up. So doing so promotes more often communication among your teams and therefore an increase in the common understanding of the goals and vision is there. Pursue the learning opportunities. It is entirely possible that the day-to-day work and responsibilities of your organizations do not provide ample opportunities for learning or development because you are busy into your routine work only. So everyday tasks can sometimes appear as barriers to anything new merely due to the routine is there. However, providing and prioritizing learning among your organization can be an invaluable method for delegating resources and encouraging the company to maintain growth is there. So there is a wide variety of ways in which to encourage the learning and development among your organization, for example coaching, training, breakout sessions and third one is that is about the be flexible as a leader. Leadership flexibility can be translated in many ways. In changing times, leaders must become involved in various ways that were not traditionally in norms. So therefore, today with the emergence of efficient communication technology, traditionally steep hierarchical organizations are flattering. So here this is the important because the process, that idea that is the leadership will have to adopt to the organization needs in much way the same way the organization must adopt to market needs or the changing times are there. Essentially, developing a flexible and result oriented style of the management is beneficial to improving the organizational adaptability and due to the inherent nature of flexible leaders to promote innovation within the minds and actions of the employees are concerned. When we are focusing on the building intuitive processes, so intuition is the mind's ability to perform a task or operate a procedure without much cognitive awareness or the conscious reasoning. So building intuitive processes can be vital to the functionality of teams that are separated or integrated with the change. The benefits of the intuitive processes are many, especially intuitive processes promote a team's ability to focus on problem solving as opposed to the basic operational duties. So it also promotes the ability for the quick change adoption and simply yet effective systems and operations. So however, intuition can be used in a way that is entirely beneficial and the other organizations looking to build each adaptable and adaptable systems are there. The final tip is that is about analysis paralysis function of the fear, more especially the fear of change. Whether that change brings about good or bad things does not matter. It is the nature of the human mind to dislike ambiguity more than the potential for success, and this is why people are the leading reason behind ineffective change and the change resistance. They are trying to keep the same old and the same old intact is there. It is important to recognize when you are analyzing the preparation and when you are procrastinating a change is there. So some useful tips from attaining this organizational adaptability is there. Finally, include others in the process. Don't wait for the stars to align. People who wait for the stars to align before they can make a decision are going to be waiting for the rest of their lives. Prioritize your activities that once that directly affects the desired outcome is there. Chunk the issue, breaking down the big issue or decisions that must be made into small bite size shaped over time helps make them more manageable and the less meaning is there. So, this is a case study on the Kirana stores which you can refer, and this case study will give you the idea that is the how this designing is essential in the given the environmental complexity. This is a research paper which talks about a dynamic model of organizational resilience, that is which organizations they are very strong in resilience and they perform better. This is the book which is the Organizational Resilience Handbook, and this book will be a practical guide on the achieving the greater resilience is there, and this original resilience handbook which will be giving you to understand that is the benchmarking performances and implementing resilience frameworks in any organization. These are the references as usual. For the further studies, please go through these references. You will find that is the much more detail is also given on this particular, that is how to be make your organization more adaptive and the flexible is there. Thank you.